meeting was it was the quarterly meeting, which is quarterly from really the time when we kicked off the whole private sector engagement in May, the governor's residence, and then Tom helped us as well with kind of pulling together the information from that meeting in May, and had a follow-up meeting in July, and really worked on how how can we set this up that it really is the private sector leading it, as opposed to government continuing to say, hey, let's meet again, and then determining what that meeting would look like. And during that meeting in July, there was a decision by participants, which were all private sector, to regroup in October, or 90 days, to see what work had been done. And so during that meeting in July, two committees were stood up, or actually three, a steering committee, and then we had also the chairs were selected and confirmed, and that's Pat Schell, our illustrious Pat Schell, as well as Carmela Hindraker. And so there was an access committee and a transportation committee. And the committees were really developed around the different operational issues that they identified. They picked a couple of things that they thought they can show some progress on in 90 days. And so the meeting yesterday was a regroup to talk about what had been accomplished and what do we want to do moving forward. I think of the three meetings we had, yesterday was the most exciting. And it was because Pat, as the chair, has done a really terrific job at keeping the group engaged, and has dedicated a lot of time and effort to doing that. So yesterday's meeting was hosted by the private sector. It was at Harristown Properties, which is the organization that Pat works for. And we had about 32 people attending, and it was almost all, again, private sector folks from multiple sectors. Tom did a fantastic job kind of teasing out input from the different sectors, and to keep it kind of a multifaceted perspective. So we were able to have, from the government side, we had state police as well as PennDOT that could speak to the specifics of some of the issues that came up, and then certainly as well as PEMA. And so the agenda was kind of built around many of the people that were there had not been involved before. So there was a great opportunity to kind of explain what this model looks like in this kind of a private sector engagement. And then had a chance to kind of review what the group said they would do, what they accomplished, had a terrific discussion about a policy that the private sector provided input on, and that one was, I was nervous about that one, not yesterday, but just in general, because that would be the first time from the state perspective that we're getting input on a state policy from non-state entities, and that's not been done before. And so it was really a kind of a moment of truth in terms of, we've said that we want input, and we've said that we want to do this, and accepting the input from the private sector was really kind of that test of, are we really able to do what we said we wanted to do? And so that was really exciting to be able to hear that discussion, get more input, and then they had an opportunity to look at some of the tools that exist, like GeoCollaborate and our PA 511. And then the day ended with probably the most exciting thing, which was Tom asked, who would be, based on what you've seen today, who would be interested in continuing and regrouping in 6 months. And I think the entire room raised their hand. And part of the state that said he'd love to host it. So yesterday was, I think, the first meeting where it really showed how the model works. And I think everybody that attended understood how the model works. And I think that was the first meeting where everyone left really kind of getting how it works. And so yesterday was a particularly exciting day for us here at PEMA. I'll be curious kind of what Pat has to say. But the other part that I was really pleased to see is that there are a number of issues that came up that I would expect come up in other states as well. I've heard them come up, and I've heard them come up in our discussions here as well as at our quarterlies and our meetings with all hazards. And what I really like is that there's the opportunity for us to engage some of the businesses and some of the sectors in these issues and take kind of a regional approach as opposed just to an isolated state approach. And so there were some opportunities where I know there were some businesses there yesterday that would be very interested in being involved with, kind of working through solutions on a multi-state level. So that was kind of neat to see it all work, both on the state level and then moving it up to a regional level.
Okay. Thank you, Molly. Any questions for Molly? Just to undergird that, Dave Vanderbloemen in Virginia, Stacy Neal and I had a long conversation about how this works. And so I don't know, Molly, has Stacy reached out to you yet, but I think we're going to start building a little coalition of states, maybe start in Region 3 and then work from there, Region 3 and 4. So I don't know if Stacy's...
I haven't heard from Stacy yet.
Okay. Well, she was very interested in getting a hold of you, so I'll follow up and make sure that connection happens. So, excellent.
Good. Yeah, like the issue of staging, having a place to stage. We've had a couple of businesses or utilities, use the connections with the group to talk with, PennDOT and using the park and ride to be able to stage equipment. But those are, kind of piecemeal issues, and I know, multiple utilities have to deal with that, not just utilities. So some of the issues that came up was, it was almost like, if we could have prompted those issues, those are the ones that I would have prompted to come up. So that was pretty exciting.
So, Molly, I have on my action list, Dave Vanderbloemen and I spoke about in Virginia, they are really ahead of the game in the staging coordination area. So, Dave, I'm going to coordinate with you to maybe provide just a brief on how you do it, because I think you've got a lot of lessons learned there we can learn from if you'd be willing to do that.
Do you want me to do that now, or do you want me to do it at another meeting?
Well, it depends how much time. I mean, sure, if you have a second, take it now. But if you need some time to go through that, I think it'd be worth a deep dive into it.
Well, just at a
I would love
level,
a deep dive into it.
At a high level, after Hurricane Irene, I mean, every utility has an escalating response plan, which includes bringing people off property, which ultimately results in processing these folks, getting them integrated into your organization, getting them materials, staging, and if you get enough people on the property, you have to look at maybe even lodging them in places that you normally would not. So we started with our real estate group looking at areas that had large real estate, maybe some brick and mortar buildings, because processing and going through that works a lot better in a building that has electricity and some of the amenities that you can internet service helps a lot to be able to download presentations that have you. We onboard, everybody gets an ID card and run through security. So we do a lot of stuff. Currently, I think we have 27 locations in the state of Virginia that we can use in various processing and staging, staging materials, and then lodging. Obviously, the bigger the property is, the better the parking, racetracks, airports, fairgrounds, those work really good. But there's other places, parking lots, malls that are no longer being used, and our real estate department does a really good job of working with those. It's not a one and done thing. We have a logistics person that does this basically. He spends probably a day or two a week validating, making sure these places are still there, looking over contracts, that type of stuff. So it's a full-time endeavor, but it's well worth the effort. We brought 1,300 people on the property here 2 weeks ago for Michael. It went without a hitch. That didn't come by accident. So briefly, that's what we do, Tom.
No, that's great. I'm going to circle back, Dave. I think that would be worthwhile because this came up unprompted yesterday, and this we tested some things down in North Carolina. I think Dave, the model that you guys have is one to build upon. I just thought it just ran smooth. Here you go, 1,300 people. That's that's not a couple of cars, right? That's a big effort.
That's a lot of trucks, and in the areas that we had to put them in, Southside Virginia, we ended up parking trucks in, and we opted out of setting up man camps, if you will, bringing in trailers. We opted to bus them to hotels and places to stay that were within an hour and a half of where their vehicles were. But it worked out for us logistically because we were able to feed them, take care of them where the trucks were parked, and we would bus them to the hotels. So from a work management standpoint, it sounds a little bit inefficient, but if you can get everybody to stop at the same time, get them their work assignments, get them fed in one location, that does make it a heck of a lot easier, more organized, and we finished fairly quickly for 607,000 customers being impacted. 90% of them back on within 48 hours. We finished in just under 4.5 days, so it worked out pretty good for us.
So Molly,
Southside Virginia, if anybody's familiar with Southside Virginia, there's a lot of open space and not a whole lot of hotels.
yeah. So
I'll tell you, I'd love to be able to kind of bring a group together from some of the private sector folks to kind of listen to a presentation on that.
So
it's different across. I tell you, FPL has probably the most integrated, the most scalable. Think about it; they've got 4,000 miles, probably a coastline. Most of their customers are within 20 miles of it, so they've got everything from north of Orlando all the way down around Miami, and then back up to almost to Tampa.
yeah.
So they've got a different plan than what we've got. Our geographic territory is a lot more consolidated, so we do it a little bit differently, but it needs to be scalable and adaptable. We have no problem plagiarizing anybody else's plan. So. I like the idea of instead of my real estate department trying to shake the trees to find out where these locations are, is to have people come to us and say, hey, have you thought about our site? Because you go to these places when there's not a problem, and they look at it and say, yeah, we really don't need you. But then when they're out of lights and they're looking at a 4 or 5 day restoration, they probably would be really happy to see a couple hundred bucket trucks parked in their facility.
Yeah. So. And Dave, who in Florida Power Light coordinates that? Is that Manny? Is that Ileana? Who would be the?
It's probably Tom Gwaltney. He's the me of FPL.
Okay.
I think Ileana works for Tom.
So.
But I would work through Tom
okay.
To probably facilitate that.
I'll set that up. Pat and Molly, this is a great opportunity to leverage, some of this information. We could easily set up a call and have a discussion with that. We're probably going to end up forming a staging subcommittee of some kind, right? At both the fleet, so we can get the folks together that are interested in this topic. Having the states support it and actually assist would be very helpful. We'll see where it goes. Good.
Sure.
Okay. Let me introduce Pat Scholl. Pat is the chair or co-chair for the Endeavor work group. So, Pat, I'll turn it over to you. Maybe provide some perspectives on the work group and yesterday's workshop.
Thank you, Tom. Once again, I appreciate you being the cheerleader throughout the day. That's a long time for people to sit and listen. But what I found of great value yesterday was the amount of sidebars that went on between private and public sector folks that they volunteered to sit beside each other, talk through some things, exchange business cards, start developing those relationships. And when you can bring public and private together like that, we're all human beings, so to speak. It's not a it's not a corporate and a large government. It's, it's Molly, Tom, Jim, John, Jane type of thing. And I think I really liked how PennDOT was there, and he didn't stand behind an attorney when he spoke, and solicited suggestions and recommendations. The same thing. I really was so grateful that the major from the Pennsylvania State Police was there. Seemed like a down-to-earth guy, good sense of humor. Was not stiff and firm and hard, and no one drew a line yesterday saying no. I didn't hear that come up at all, saying we can't do that. And that's one thing that I think at any level, local, county, state, regional, federal, doesn't matter. When no one can say no, we can work. Let's find a way to work it out. I think it's already a success. And so that's what I found from yesterday, that no one said no. People voluntarily talked to each other. They weren't talked to, and it was very engaging. So I think that's what I'm basing yesterday's meeting on, that it was a success.
Hey, Pat.
Yes.
I'd like to credit Pat with having state police there. You brought that up a few times, where don't you think it's about time we bring them in? And I appreciate that, because that's really what prompted us bringing state police in. So appreciate that.
Yeah, I just, in all seriousness, I go back to my Air Force days, where I had a control entry to nuclear weapons or whatever job I was doing. We had an entry authority list, or we had badge that had certain identifiers on it that these people were authorized to get through. And it was really black and white. There was not gray. And what I liked about working with the police is once they realize what challenges you face, they start looking not so much at the black and white of it, but they look at the gray areas, and yeah, we can be flexible. It makes sense. We can work through that, and we're not going to get in trouble for doing it. We're just not going to say no where it's closed. We're going to say, yeah, that works, and let's work with you. So I think the sooner you can bring law enforcement in, and that the major's a high roller. He's in charge of the whole patrol for the state of Pennsylvania. So I really was grateful they just didn't send a token trooper, and I was glad they sent somebody with a position of authority. So that I was grateful for that, and I think that's really going to pay off tenfold for us. I really do.
Yeah. Pat, can you just Pat, the group's working on a pretty good sized parking lot of use cases. Can you just touch on really quickly the three that currently the use cases that the group is working on?
No, I can't, because I can't think of it right now.
Okay.
Well, we had the big one of the access.
Right. Well, access transportation, but I really thought we spent a lot of time on people interjecting with the use cases. How about us? And Tom, I don't know. How do you see that when people start saying, okay, how about this industry? How about that industry? We need to get through, or we need 100,000 eggs a day, which I found interesting. 100,000 eggs a day for the pharmaceutical folks. I mean, how about us thing? How would you categorize that?
I think the magic, and Kent, you and I have talked about this. The magic of this group is that it's probably one of the few that gets this cross-sector dialogue going around a single problem. Everybody thinks they have the understanding of what problem number one is until you go around 12 different businesses across 8 different sectors, and you realize that, okay, I thought eggs was just for the food sector. I didn't realize in Pennsylvania eggs are massively critical to the health sector and their testing and their pharmaceutical. I had no idea. So that cross-sector dialogue is so important.
90%. Oh, sorry, Tom.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think it was 90% of the eggs in Pennsylvania forget the statistic. It's make the flu vaccine for most of the northern hemisphere.
It's unbelievable.
That's what I understand also, Molly.
It's unbelievable.
It's a stunning number.
No, and I thought it all went to Egg McMuffins, right? I had no idea. So,
They don't use eggs in that, Tom.
no, but I think to that point, I think I know for myself, every time I go through this process, I learn things. I pick up nuances. It's just a constant revealing of information that is like an aha moment. And for the SICE work group, the three big use cases they're working on now are pretty much transportation focused. They did not, or there was not a common awareness of one place to go for state wide transportation data, and that was we got briefing on the State 511 website, and we had a federated agreement. We all agree we're going to use that site as our common operating picture for transportation. So we had a briefing yesterday from PennDOT, and every time they brief, they add something new. I had no idea they have that alert capability, which was very cool. They were integrating Waze. Waze data now is going to start to integrate. They've integrated the Turnpike into this one website. Fantastic tool, 511pa.gov. So that's one use case as a common operating picture for transportation. The second one was really a look at access, but not past the yellow tape. It's access to roads that are restricted during a disaster. And this is most unique in that this is bedrock policy within government, that through Molly and Jeff and through the work group, they are opening up and inviting private sector to shape the policy, actually write the words on the document that is going to be adopted or modified and adopted by the state. I've never seen that. Never have I seen that without lobbyists and a lot of regulation work. This is being done at the operations level, and it's going to happen. So that was a second one, and the third one I always forget which one. I got so many in my head, Molly. The third one, we had situation awareness.
Yeah.
Empties. Empties.
The definition of empty.
Yeah. So in Pennsylvania, once you deliver your load of fuel or food or goods, if your trailer or tanker is empty, you can't drive on those certain roads during a storm, because PennDOT knows 90% of the big furball accidents occur with empty trailers that jackknife. They don't have enough weight to get over the mountains. So the short-term solution is they're going to try to determine collectively through a work group what's the minimum ballast weight that a truck or tanker ought to have on board for them to get up. The police aren't going to pull you over to make sure you have the weight, but if you slide off the road and cause problems, you're going to get fined and double fined and triple fined, basically. I thought that was a really interesting comment the major gave us. They don't have time to police this, but if you have an accident or you cause an accident, you're going to be in deep kimchi. So, and for me, as I was driving home, the number one takeaway that I heard yesterday was when the state was saying, look, we want to share the document with you, but we're a little nervous about giving you this draft policy document because we don't want this to get out to the media and the press, and now all of us look, whatever. And it was the first time I've heard government wanting to share information with private and concerned that it would get leaked out. I thought that was a real paradigm shift, because heretofore it's always been the opposite. It's always been private sector wanting to share with government, but it might get into the hands of non-operational people. So I think that was a really great example of trust building. And I know that's on the task list for the work group, to come up with a policy of, hey, how do we kick people out that violate the trust, right? We're not there yet, but there's a policy that will have to be shaped for that. So, Pat, I thought it was a great meeting. I appreciate you guys sponsoring that. That was a wonderful venue. So I'll give you a final comment here before we move on.
Tom, there was no political correctness yesterday either, which I really enjoyed. People were very honest and direct, and that was from both sides, public and private. Yesterday seemed like we were all one team, one fight.
Yeah.
Which I think when you can accomplish that, it makes a big difference. Now, if you've ever been on a DMZ between North and South Korea, I didn't just invent that. That's what those signs say there. But one team, one fight, I think really makes a big difference. And I saw that yesterday. The thing matter what industry people are from. And I'll give you a quick example, was the retired police chief from Derry Township, who now works for Hershey Foods, was telling me that they rely on milk from dairy farms within 110 miles of their Hershey plant. And they manufacture 70 million candy kisses a day. That's just candy kisses. That's not the other stuff. And if that milk doesn't get through, because the expectation is to have those 70 million kisses to their warehouse for distribution out on other trucks. But it all goes back to those milk trucks getting from the dairy farms to their plant in time from that 110-mile radius to start the ball rolling to distribute those 70 million a day Hershey Kisses throughout the world. And it all comes back to the local emergency management, the county emergency management, the local police, the fire departments, state police, all working together within 110 miles of Hershey that has an impact on a world distribution product. And so I think, we've broken down that far, and people start looking, okay, I can make a difference here just by helping and cooperating. So I really saw a one team, one fight approach